Hello, welcome back to Evil Genius Props. I'm Mike, and I am this time making us a wand. My daughter wants to be Hermione Granger for Halloween, despite my own feelings on Harry Potter. It's a long story, but suffice to say, I worked at a bookstore when they first started coming out, and book 4 came out and didn't have enough for everyone, and somehow this was my fault. Anyway, what we're going to do is take some 1-inch dowel rod and make it into a wand that lights up and can be a light for her Halloween costume as well while she's out trick-or-treating and be able to shine some light on some things. There are cheaper ones available. I could probably buy a dozen, 2 dozen on Amazon for less than my material costs, but they wouldn't be wood and they probably wouldn't be as bright as we would like. So let's get started. So to make our wand, we're actually using cut-off section of 1-inch dowel rod. They sell these usually in a 3-foot section. I cut it down to 14.5. That is the same length as Hermione's wand after I did a little bit of research. At least the one that's available as a replica. Now, because it is so thick, it's meant to be a wand, not exactly a blackjack. We're going to cut it down and shave it down this way, but the reason why we're starting off so wide is so that it will hold our battery pack. We'll be able to cut a slot in the base and just slide the battery pack right in and hide it. And then the wire is going to wrap up around and will be disguised within the vines and leaves. To shave it down, we're going to go ahead and chuck it into the vise here. It's actually at an angle, so that it's angled up, and we're going to smooth it, do a little bit at a time, take some down, spin it, do the same. If I had a wood lathe, this would be a lot faster. I don't have one, I don't have the room for it, I don't usually have a need for one, so I'm not looking to get one. Just going to use this for today. Alright, and in less time than you'd expect, and nice big pile of shavings, you end up with this. It's got a nice angle to it. But not completely round. Close enough, but you can still see some of the straight lines from that. So the next step is sanding. We're going to start off with the power sander and knock down the high parts, and then probably finish it off with sandpaper. Not completely round, but we're a lot closer than we were. The key thing to notice there was that as I was sanding, I kept rolling it and moving it. We don't want to get a flat spot from sanding it. Now, this is probably not the best kind of sander to use for this, but it's the sander that I happen to have at the moment. So we're going to use that, but it does do a perfectly fine job if you just sort of keep moving. It's not perfect, but we got it close enough that we can finish it off with some sandpaper. Alright, gonna call that pretty good. We're gonna have to paint it and cover it with vines and everything anyway, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but considering we started with this and now we have this, I'd say we've done a pretty good job. After cutting and sanding, we've got a vaguely wand-shaped object. The next step is going to just be to put in the wiring. So I'm using these little guys. Holds a 3-volt battery in there, and then has the wiring that comes on up. I'm actually going to cut a slot to hold this into the bottom of the wand. So that's going to be our next step, is to make that cut. just going to trace the sides here so I know exactly how big I need it to be. And sort of then just draw those lines in and connect them. Now we're going to take this over to the bandsaw and cut that slot out. Got these cuts made, just need to cut it across. Just going to take a coping saw and make that finished cut. Just easiest way to do that. And there we go, little slot cut out. Then I can slide this in there. Switch sticks out just enough. We'll wrap that up along the side. On off switch. And I've already attached the push button switch. It's going to go right there. All right, with our slot all cut and pretty the one part done, let's talk about soldering. Full disclosure, I'm not the best at soldering. If you want to learn how to solder, watch somebody else's video. But the basics are, we're going to take our battery pack with the switch, run that to a resistor, to our LED, and then one on the other side for the ground. Use some wire to extend those out to make sure that they're the right length. So we take, let's put that back in there. We're going to want this all the way up at the top. So that's roughly how long we're going to need that run to be. I'm just going to cut this for the whole length, and then we'll actually attach the resistor on the end. Trim off some of the wire, well, the wire insulation, and then just going to solder this right onto there. I like to use my helping hands and get those nice and close. All right. First things first, we want to tin the wire. So apply the soldering iron, heat up the wire a little bit. All right, I've got solder on the wire. Join that straight onto the switch. Not particularly pretty, but as my disclaimer said, soldering is not my strong point, but I do well enough to get it done. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and do the ground side. And it's roughly the same process. Cut the wire to length. insulation. In this case, we need to tin both wires. And then use the soldering iron to then melt the solder on both wires together. That's your connection. All right, our wiring's all done. What I'm going to do is cut a little slot in the end here for the LED to sort of fit in a little better. That's totally optional, and it'll probably work just as well just to hold that in with some hot glue or something. I'm just going to cut a little bit of a channel so it sits a little more flat on there. But you could easily fill that in with just hot glue, which is what we're going to use to hold down the sides anyway. So, but I'm just going to take my razor saw here. I could use something like the bandsaw, but I worry about that would actually cut too deep too quickly. Because all we want is just enough to sort of let it sit in. Basically like that. But there we go. Next step is just I'm going to tighten up the heat shrink that I put on there, and cover up the other joints with hot glue, and also use hot glue to sort of draw in vines and such. It's also going to help hide our wiring. It's all wired up. Hot glue's had a chance to set. All that's left right now is to paint it. Need to cover up a couple little spots that we don't want to get paint on them. But that's really just judicious application of masking tape. So we're going to mask the LED, the switch. Also, we're going to mask this switch down here, because that is ultimately our overall power switch, and we don't want that to get gummed up. Now, some parts of this, we don't need to be worried too much about the tape. For instance, the LED up there, as long as we get it off the wood, we're good. Same thing down here, we just don't want to cover up this part. However, for the switch, I don't want a big blue spot in the middle of the paint. So what we're going to do is take just a little bit of our masking tape. Just cut it down to size with an X-Acto knife. And yes, I know I'm using a piece of blue tape to make sure that I don't have a big blue spot in the middle of the thing. The irony is not lost on me. All right. We're taped up. Everything that's left, we're going to spray paint brown. And be happy with that. That's going to be the first step, is just do a base coat. In this case, it's going to be a dark brown. And we'll finish over top of that. All right, I've got this in my, I'll call it my spray box, but it's a cardboard box. I've got it sort of hanging up on this side. I'm going to do this side and sort of flip it over and do the other. All right, spray paint's mostly dry enough to handle anyway. So next step is actually going to just be to, we're going to dry brush on, in this case some light taupe, mostly because that's the color I had. Probably would have gone with like a raw umber or a raw sienna, but didn't happen to have that on hand. But we're going to dry brush that. So apply a little bit, and we really want to get most of that off. we're doing is just sort of doing this. We're bringing out, catching some of the grain from the wood. Just hit this really lightly. Just catching the high points. And I'm not worried about hitting it on the wires, because that's our next step. Is some rub and buff. This is a wax metallic finish, and it's really neat, but a little bit goes a long way. So just a tab of that, and then what we're going to do, going to try to hit that on my thumb as well as on those vines. Just going to cover over, and again, just sort of using this lightly. This is maybe a little bit darker there than I wanted. Let that all finish drying. Once that's done, we're going to seal the whole thing. All right, and here we are with our finished product. Overall, I'm happy with the results. It does what I want it to do. It's hard to see with the lights, but it's actually a super bright LED, which will be great for working, walking at night, trick-or-treating, sort of a built-in flashlight. Let's review what I learned. Basically learned how to round this out from a 1-inch dowel rod to maybe a 1/4 inch without a lathe, which was nice. Be a good skill to have in the future. I never actually wired up one of these micro switches, and it is a tiny little bugger, and was pretty hard to actually get to work. The first one actually, like, the connection snapped off. I also learned just how well I can use the hot glue there on the wood as a decorative element. Things I do differently. So one of the things that two things I don't like, specifically related to that hot glue actually. One thing would be you could just draw out the elements ahead of time, so you're not sort of trying to make it work with the hot glue gun while you're going, so you're not like trying to figure it out. So maybe draw out a design ahead of time. Also, I mean, it didn't come across very consistently in places. That could be me, that could just be a condition of the hot glue. There might be better ways to do that, including just like casting something, or you can actually even use, maybe make like a silicone mold and then use hot glue still in that, and then you can probably heat that up and attach that onto the wood. I haven't tried that. And then the other thing is probably for that rub and buff, for the small elements like that, is instead of getting this sort of overspill, basically, would be maybe use a Q-tip to apply instead of my fingertip, and then you could rub it with your finger to shine it up. I mean, overall, I am still happy with this. I think my daughter will be. She hasn't seen the finished product yet, but if she's not, we'll let you know. What I would use this for is if you're doing a production of, say, puffs or something where you needed a wand from the stage. That extra bright light is going to make it visible under the show lighting, which maybe the ones that you just can buy on Amazon for a few bucks wouldn't. It might be worth checking to see and getting some of those ones from Amazon. I mean, even the licensed replica wands that light up are less than $30. So I could have probably bought my daughter a Hermione Granger wand uh, for less than it would have cost me both in materials and time to make this. But I wanted to do it myself. And I think it'll be more special for her as well. The difference is it's actually wood, not just resin or plastic or whatever it is they make them out of. If you're doing a production you need a bunch, it might be worth seeing if you can get the ones from Amazon or wherever and just buy a bunch of them and replace the LED on them with a brighter tip so that it lights up more. But overall, I am happy with that. Like I said, I learned in the process, which is half the fun for me, and it's was a worthwhile effort, and hopefully my daughter's as happy with it as I am. That's it for today. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.